Welcome to another Acumatica tutorial. My name is Zach Mayer with the Mayer Group, and today's Acumatica training is going to take us through vendors. So if we head right into the system, here is my home page on my demo company. So to navigate to the vendors page, we're just going to start typing vendor into the universal search. We're going to see vendors as an option, click on that, and it brings us right to our vendors page. So immediately we see a table that displays all of the vendors that we have here in our system. So you can filter your information you see here through a few different ways. So first you could click on any of these column headers. So if we want to click on the country, we can then specify that it equals United States, for example, or actually US. So now we see all the countries that are currently located in the US. You could then go and click on clear filter to remove that, or you could also just delete it out manually, and you could do that for any of these fields. You could type in a specific city, you could have it contain, equal, and do all these quick filters through that method. You can also click in the very top left corner of this table, and you now see your available columns as well as your selected columns. So the selected columns are all of the different pieces of information we have displayed in our table right now, and then your available columns are all the additional tables you could add in by customizing this table. So if we wanted to remove our last modified by column, we could then click on the arrow to send that back over to the available columns, and we could instead bring in the last modified on. We can then use these up and down arrows to decide where it's going to appear in our table, and we can definitely play around with this in all different ways. And then once you hit OK, we're going to see the changes reflect immediately. So now we have our last modified on date displaying to the right of our city. You also have this filter icon up here where you can create some filters that you can save as well as share with other users on your system. So I've created an active US vendors filter here where the country has to equal the United States and the status has to equal active. So you can pick all different types of statuses here. You could go in and add even more options. You could specify any of these properties here and say the city has to equal Vancouver, and you could even switch some of these to an or as well. And then once you save it, you would typically give it a name if this is a new filter you're creating, but I've already created this filter here. And then once we apply it, we now see it only brings our Vancouver records. If we go and remove that and apply it, it brings back everything in the United States. And up here we see our active US vendors filter we've created. There's also one that I've created called admin modified, as well as our all records, which will show every vendor we currently have in our system. Now right now, all of our records in the vendor table are in the US, so we can go and change one of these to see how the filter will respond. So if we click on test vendor, it's going to bring us to our vendor form, and it's going to be the same exact form you'd see if you were to create a new record by clicking on the plus icon. But instead, if we go into edit our vendor we already have, we're going to see this page pop up. So we see the status is currently on hold. We can change that to make it an active vendor here. So the first tab we're going to see is going to include the ID and the name of your vendor, as well as the general info tab. So here we have the company name, and then you can specify email, phone number, and various contact information, as well as the address for the company. Now the only required field here is the country, which we already have as the United States, but we're going to go and change that to, let's say, Vietnam, to see how that's going to affect our filter. Over here we have the vendor class, which has already been selected, and when you pick your vendor class, based off of the classes that are defined in your system, it's going to fill in some other fields for you automatically based on the defaults that you have selected for that class. So when we picked suppliers, it automatically picked the terms for us, but you can always override the default values and switch that to a different term set you have in your system. Then the last section that we're going to talk about here on this tab is going to be your personal data privacy. So you see there's a checkbox here with a little exclamation point, and it's telling you that the consent to the processing of personal data has not been given yet, or it's expired. So it's going to remind you to click on this checkbox here to provide consent to the processing of personal data. So once you have that consent, you can check that box off. It'll automatically fill in today's date for the date of consent. And then you can also specify when that consent is going to expire. So I can set it for 1 year from today and put that field in. And then 1 year from now, it'll once again ask for that consent to be given. On the next tab, we have the payment settings. Now we're going to see on the left side, we have the contact and address fields, and they look pretty much identical to what we saw in the general info tab. And it's going to default by having this checkbox selected for us, which says same as main. So by default, it would fill in all of these data fields we have here. So if we were to give a phone number, then let's just say we put in a number there. It's one number too long. If we go in here, it automatically puts in that phone number for us. Now, if we were to want to provide a different address for payment that is separate from the address given on general info, you can always uncheck this checkbox and it'll let you provide a new address or set of contact information. So that is how you can then go and change that information that's been provided. We can also pick our default payment settings over here. So we have the payment method, and you can pick from any payment method that's stored in your system here. So if we wanted to change it from check to credit card, we could do that. And then you can also select the cash account that you want to associate with it, have some payment by settings here, lead time, and then the prepayment percent. So if we want to change that back to check, we're also going to see it provides that cash account for us. Next we have purchase settings. So again, we see that it's defaulting to same as main, but then over here on the right, we have some tax information as well as shipping instructions. So you can pick your shipping terms here, which was defaulted to collect, but I can always override that and set something else. So I could pick prepaid. You can also pick your ship via settings. So anything that's stored in your system will show up on this list here. So let's pick FedEx. Then you have your receipt actions down here as well. Next, you have the Contacts tab. So if you want to create a contact that you want to associate with your vendor, you can click on the Add Contact here. It's going to ask to save the changes that you've made to the vendor so far. And in a new window, we're going to pop up and see the contact page here. So by default, it's going to be creating a new contact. But the nice thing is it's going to automatically fill in the business account for the vendor we're currently editing, as well as the company name will default to the vendor that we're working with. So then you can just fill in the contact information for this contact that you're creating, as well as check, again, get that privacy for the processing of personal data. And then when you save it, they will automatically be associated with this vendor and appear on this tab here. Next, we have attributes where you can select the attributes that you can associate with a vendor and decide if it's required and set the value for it. Next, we have activities. So here you're going to see a couple different types of activities you can add and associate with your vendor account. So first, you can add a task, an event, an email, as well as various other activities on this drop down here, including phone calls, appointments, or messages. So the nice thing is if you want to add an event, you can click on this and it'll immediately pop up with the event form here, where you can give the title or the summary of your event, the location, start and end times, as well as categories. You can set the priority of it and the status. And then down here, you can provide a description of your event. But then up here, we're also going to see related activities that you can add, as well as attendees. So here you can create a long list of all the attendees you want to invite to your event. You put their name, their email address, and any comments you want, and it will show if they've been invited or not at this time. And the nice thing is you can set a default system-wide email address in Acumatica, and then when you want to invite these attendees, you can invite specific ones, or you can invite the entire list of attendees that you've added to this event form, and it will then automatically send out those invitations through the email that you've provided in the system. You can also send emails specifically through the vendor form here. It's going to bring up the email activity form. By default, it will add the from email account that you have defined in your system, as well as the to email account that you defined on the general info tab. So if you've provided a contact email address for the vendor, it will automatically default that value as well. And then you just have to provide your subject and the email content, and then send it directly from this page. Next, we have our GL accounts that were again defined based on the vendor class that we've selected, but you can always go in and once again switch any of those if you need to manually change one of these specific accounts. And the AP account and the cash discount account are the two that are required to be filled in. Then lastly, we have our mailing settings tab here, where you're going to have your mailing section, which can include the email accounts, notification templates, and formats. And then again, you have checkboxes over here to decide if they're active or not and overridden. And then down here, you also have recipients, where you again have the active checkbox, the carbon copy, and you can define the different contact types through this dropdown here. But that is going to be a quick little overview of the vendor form here. If we save our value or save our account and go back, we now see the country has changed. So to again show that it will instantly reflect in our filter, if we now go to the active US vendors, it looks like it still has our Vancouver setting here, so let's remove that. And let's save it this time. We see all of our US vendor accounts displayed here, except for the one that is now no longer located in the US. So our test vendor no longer appears as a US vendor. And it's that easy to go ahead and edit any of the filters whenever you see needed. And you can share them with all other users on your system as well if you choose to do so. But that is a quick high-level overview of vendors. If you have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out to the Mayor Group, and we will have more Acumatica tutorials coming soon. So keep an eye out for those, and thanks for watching.